Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our financial aid night presentation. A little different format this year. We are coming to you live virtual from Eastern Regional Broadcast Studio. We're very fortunate and proud to have Mr. John Iacovelli as our presenter this evening. A little bit about Mr. Iacovelli. He is a representative from HESA, the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, who is the governing body of everything financial aid related to all college-going students. He's also the former Dean of Enrollment Management from Stockton University, and he's here tonight to walk you through the financial aid process and hopefully give you a little input into your first steps into the college journey. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John and take it away.
Thank you, Jay. There we go. I think we're live. Again, good evening, everyone. As Jason mentioned to you, I am John Iacovelli, coming to you from New Jersey Higher Ed. And I have, unfortunately, over 40 years of experience in admissions and financial aid, that many, all in New Jersey. But besides all the different titles and positions that I've had in New Jersey in higher ed, there's one other very important thing. I'm the father of three, and yes, I put all three through college. So I'm going to go through this professionally with you, but also on a personal level. I have gone through what many of you are just now embarking on. So with that in mind, let's go to the first PowerPoint slide, the mission for HESA. We're going to click ahead. And just real quick, as Jason mentioned too, Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, this is an acronym you want to be familiar with, HESA, because as the state agency, they provide many of the products and services that you will need as you pursue your college education. And not just on the financial end of it, as you'll see from many of the publications that are listed below. So keep HESA in mind, and as you will see when I'm doing my presentation, that we will not only be taking you through the process of financial aid, but also showing you resources, both from the state and from the federal government, that will help guide you through this process. So yes, we're going to go through the process itself, but we're also going to give you resources that will help you. So with that in mind, let's move to the next slide. Before we really get into the nitty-gritty of financial aid and the process, I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and show you financial aid from the other side of the desk, so to speak. These are the goals that a financial aid office have when they're helping their students. Obviously, their primary goal is to help you in paying for college. But let's break this down. If they're going to help you, one of the first things they need to do is evaluate the family's ability to pay for an educational costs. And the way that we do that is by you filling out what is called the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. Now, without the FAFSA, you cannot be involved in the financial aid process. We know that anyone going off to college at any type of college will need to file that. Number two, that financial aid officer is there to help you because they're looking to distribute the limited resources that they have in an equitable manner. And the most important word in that sentence, it's not equitable, it's limited. They're limited in the amount of aid that they have. About 2 years ago, I read an article that was in the Wall Street Journal, and they were looking at financial aid on a national level. And what they did in this article is they looked at the expected family contribution from the FAFSA that every student gets once they filled out the FAFSA, and the cost of attendance at the different colleges that these students are going to attend. And what they found is that if they were going to be able, dollar for dollar, to cover all stated need from the FAFSA, they would need at least 3 times the amount of money that they presently have. So again, to give you a realistic picture, all of these colleges do the best they can to get you financial aid, but it is limited resources. Number three, when they're giving you these packages, these financial aid packages, they're trying to provide a balance of gift aid and self-help aid. I want you to be familiar with these terms so that they don't throw you off or confuse you in any way. If you hear a financial aid officer, or anyone else for that matter, talking about gift aid, they're talking about grants and scholarships. If you hear them use the term self-help, what they really mean there are all the different types of college loans, which we're going to go through this evening, or they're talking about work on campus. So again, gift aid, self-help aid, just a couple of euphemisms that are used. And finally, looking at financial aid from the financial aid officer's standpoint, they're responsible for implementing both federal and state regulations at that college or university. So yes, they're looking to distribute that money, but please be aware that at least once a year or every other year, there are federal or state auditors coming in to make sure that they have distributed and processed that financial aid in the proper way. Because if they're not, the college is responsible for that. So just giving you, just from this one slide, a little look into what goes on behind the scenes in a financial aid office and what their responsibilities are. Okay, having said that, let's move on and really get into the process itself. Sources of aid and types of aid. Remember what the title of my presentation was, demystifying the process. Well, if I'm going to demystify it, that means I'm going to simplify it. Here's something very simple to remember on sources and types. 4 sources, 4 types. Pretty simple. 4 sources, 4 types. What are those main 4 sources? Well, the college and university itself, the federal government with all of its programs, and then, of course, the state of New Jersey, who I'm representing this evening. HESA, Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. What's the 4th one? It's private scholarships. Here on the slide, we're calling it outside organizations, but private scholarships. And when you think about private scholarships, what I want you to do is think of it in 2 terms, local and national. If you're looking for local scholarships, your expert with that is Jason and his staff. You want to go to your counselors, your high school counselors. They'll know whether a particular Rotary Club or a Lions Club or Kiwanis Club or a Memorial Scholarship, anything that's local, they'll know about it. They can guide you in the right direction. For some of you, you're going to want to look out on a national level. And there is a website called fastweb.com. Pretty sure Jason has that out on Naviance for you as well. FASTWEB. It's been around for over 20 years now, believe it or not. And when you fill out a profile of your son or daughter, they run it against thousands of different national private scholarships and give you the results back. So again, when you think about private scholarships, think in terms of local and national, and that will keep it simple for you. Remember, that's the 4 sources. What are the 4 types? Well, grants and scholarships, and yes, they are different, grants and scholarships. Employment, which really does belong under self-help in my slide, to be honest with you. And of course, loans. Let's knock employment out of the way first. We're going to be talking about all the other ones later on in my presentation. When a financial aid officer is putting together a financial aid package for your son or daughter, one of the elements that they could put in there, if you show need, is something called the Federal Work-Study Program. If you show need, they could place you in a job on the campus. Student usually works only about 5, 10, maybe 12 hours, depending on week to week. But it can keep that student in spending money for you, and that's important to know. Another thing important to know is this. If you're not offered federal work study, you still have many opportunities to work on campus. As a matter of fact, if you look at most schools, it's a 1/3, 2/3 split when it comes to employment opportunities on campus. 1/3, that federal need-based college work study that I was talking about, and the other 2/3 being campus employment. So if you have a particular skill with computers, maybe you like working in labs, or you just want to get a job in recreation department or checking IDs in the library, that's available to you. And I think it's an important thing for when students are at school to keep them in spending money more than anything else. Employment is the one type of financial aid that is not directly applied to your bill. Everything else is. And the reason it's not implied to gone to your bill is because you're getting a paycheck every other week. So just remember that when you're dealing with employment opportunities on campus. All right, we're going to go on to the next slide. Remember what I said in the beginning. We were looking to not only show you the process, but we wanted to make sure you had all of the different resources, and you were knowledgeable of all the different resources available to you. This is just one of them that you'll see in my presentation. It's called Net Price Calculator. Way back in the 2008-2009 academic year, the federal government passed a law requiring that all colleges have something called a net price calculator on their website. And all the website is there to do is to come up with the net price, the actual bottom line price that each family would have to pay. I have to tell you something. I want to be very honest. Because this was a regulation imposed by the federal government, what you're finding over the past 8 years or so that it's been around, some schools do a terrific job with net price calculator. Some, not so much. So you're going to find from school to school, some of them are very elaborate, very helpful. Others, like I say, not so much. Next slide. Here's another resource, and this is one that I especially like, and it's from the federal government. It's called College Scorecard. I find College Scorecard and the data that's on College Scorecard to be particularly helpful for those students who are initially looking at schools, and also for students who have their last, maybe it's the last 3 to 5 schools. They've got it down to that final one. I think in both of those areas, you will find that there is pertinent data and information on College Scorecard that can help. And as you can see, you can go there directly, .ed.gov, it's a federal website, but also now, this is the first time this year that they can do it, right from FAFSA on the web, there is a link that gets you right over to College Scorecard as well. And if we go on to the next slide, I'm going to show you something with College Scorecard. This is just an example. Let's just say, as an example, you were interested in these 4 schools in New Jersey. They could be schools from out of state as well, but we're just using these 4 in-state schools. But look at what they're actually talking about here. The average annual cost to go to the school. What's the salary when the student? What's the average salary when the student graduates from that school? You'll also find, it's not on the screen here, it'll also find things such as what's the average debt that a student has in college loans if I attended that particular school. So again, very pertinent information, things that you want to know when you're initially whittling down your college list, but then also information that would help you when you're down to the final 2 or 3 or 4 that you're looking at. So again, College Scorecard, you can get there on its own website, collegescorecard.ed.gov, or directly through FAFSA on the web. So I just wanted to share those with you as resources that you can use throughout the process. Let's go to the next slide. Now, as we said, nothing happens without you filing the free application for federal student aid. It doesn't matter what school you go to, 2-year, 4-year, public, private. It could be a for-profit school for that matter, all right? You'll have to file a free application for federal student aid if you're looking for any type of aid at all. But also, for some of the students who are watching this, or some of the parents that are watching this evening, some of your students may be required, depending on the school that they're interested in, to fill out another form called CSS Profile. CSS Profile is a financial aid application that many schools feel is more full, more in-depth in what they're asking than the FAFSA asks. And you will find that the schools that use CSS Profile, the best way to characterize them, the more expensive, and the more competitive to get into the school it is, the more propensity for that school to use CSS profile. So for instance, in Philadelphia, if you go to Villanova, yeah, you're going to fill out a CSS profile. If you're going to St. Joe's or Temple or LaSalle, no CSS profile. If you're in New Jersey and you're looking at Princeton, yeah, CSS profile. If you're looking at Seton Hall or Monmouth or Rider, no CSS profile. You get the idea. Lehigh, Lafayette, Bucknell, Boston College, Boston U, CSS profile. Carnegie Mellon, CSS profile. But not Penn State, not Rutgers. Okay, you get the idea. And as you can see from the screen, there is a charge for CSS profile. So again, everyone's filing the FAFSA, but only at certain schools would you need that CSS profile. Okay, so now we're filling out the form. Let's go to the next slide. We're filling out the form, and we're all sitting down to do our FAFSA. Before we're ready to go and sit down and do the file, I like to describe the FAFSA as a one-step, two-step operation. Step one, you and one parent, as the student, you and a parent, are going to get what's called an FSA ID. Since everything is done electronically, everything on the FAFSA process is done electronically, you're going to need an electronic signature. And that's what the FSA ID is. Now remember, it's only one parent, not both parents, just one of the parents getting an FSA ID, and one FSA ID for every student who's going to school. So parents, you may have 2 or 3 students in college at the same time. You'll use the same parent one on all 3 of those FAFSAs, but each student will have their own FSA ID as you fill out their FAFSA. And before you're ready to file, it's always handy to have your 2019 federal tax return next to you, along with the 2019 W-2 forms. You're going to find that there are a number of things that are asked right on the FAFSA that if you have those readily available right next to you, easy to fill out. And one that's not shown on here, I should change this slide. One that we really should have on this slide is be very aware of what your asset situation is. Any assets that are not under a retirement plan would have to show on the FAFSA. If it's in a retirement account, it will not show on the FAFSA. So these are things that you want to have prepared as you're ready to sit down and tackle and file what we call FAFSA on the web. Okay, let's go to the next slide. A question that comes up is, okay, I've given the federal government all of this information about myself and my family financially. What do they do with it? When they get all of your data electronically at the federal processors, you're going through something that's called federal methodology. And it's a formula that it was approved by Congress to determine a very important thing called the expected family contribution, or EFC. Don't get thrown off. Many years ago, federal methodology was also called uniform methodology. So whether you call it federal methodology, uniform methodology, doesn't matter. It's how they massage the numbers that you send in to come up with the expected family contribution. Your presenter here is so old that back in 1979, when we didn't have the computers, one of the first things I had to do in learning to be a financial aid officer was do federal methodology, or in those days called it uniform method. I had to do it by hand. I would sit there with a piece of paper and pencil and literally take the numbers and massage them through. And it has given me great insight into how federal methodology works. But this is the very important thing. You get an EFC, and you're going to see that that's very important as we go through these slides and the process, because it is a measurement of the family's financial strength, and that will determine how much and where and what type of aid we're going to get from each individual college that we apply to. Okay, having known that, let's go to the next. Cost of attendance. I want to bring up a very important point. Cost of attendance is purely a financial aid term. Your immediate cost to the school is tuition and fees, and if you're living on campus, room and board, and of course, books. But cost of attendance as a financial aid term we're allowed to put other consumer expenses in there that both the state and the federal government recognize. So real quick, let me give you an example. Since I retired recently from Stockton University, we'll use them as an example. If you were living on campus, you're in-state living on campus at Stockton University, your cost of attendance is probably somewhere right around $31,800, $31,900. But you don't pay $31,000 to go to Stockton. If you're living on campus, you're paying for room and board, which, depending on the meal plan you have, is probably around $11,000, $12,000 for the year at most. And you're paying tuition and fees, which is right around $14,000. So you're not paying $31,900 or $31,800. You're paying right around $25,500 or $26,000. So again, that's a good example of showing you that cost of attendance takes in more than just the immediate bills that you would receive from any school. And we use that Stockton as an example. I could use any school as an example. It would be the same principles. Okay? So, and before we move from this, another tool that was just, fairly recently developed by the state of New Jersey, by HESA, called the Financial Aid Shopping List. I think this is the second year of its existence. And with the shopping list, I guess if I was comparing it, the shopping list is for families what the calculator was for at the schools. I think that's a good way of doing that. If you remember when we were back at one of our previous slides and we were talking about net price calculator, very similar, just a different angle on that. And you'll be able to get the financial aid shopping sheet through something called the New Jersey Financial Aid Management System, or FAMS, which we'll talk about in detail a few slides down. But I just wanted to bring that up to you since that would be very, very appropriate here to understand how that works. Let's go on to the next slide. We're going to now take this whole thing, what we've taught you about expected family contribution coming from the FAFSA, cost of attendance, and show you exactly what a financial aid office will do, okay? Look at my example. We have a private school, a state school, and a two-year college or community college. So in our example, let's say a private school in state, Seton Hall. We'll use them as an example. For a state school, we'll use Stockton since I work there. I'm familiar with the numbers there. And we'll use your local county college, Camden County Community College. So we're going to say in this particular example, you applied to all three schools and got accepted. Well, let's start with Seton Hall. Seton Hall, cost of attendance now is probably right around $62,000. You filed a FAFSA. And we're going to say for the example purposes, when you filed that FAFSA, it came back with an expected family contribution of $12,000. Okay. The financial aid office at Seton Hall has that information. They're going to take their $62,000 cost of attendance and subtract your $12,000 EFC, or expected family contribution, which means that Seton Hall is trying to do its best to put together a $50,000 package for you. If they can't get all the way up to $50,000, you want to become familiar with a term called gap. All gap means is that there is a gap between the stated need and how much financial aid the school in particular can put into their package. So if we apply that to what we're talking about here, let's say you were going to Seton Hall, $50,000 is your stated need, but they were only able to put together a $42,000 package. That would mean that you have an $8,000 gap. That's all that means. Let's take it and now apply it to Stockton. You also applied to Stockton. We're going to round off the number. I know I said the cost of attendance is around $31,800 or $31,900. Let's say it's $32,000 even. Well, $32,000 minus your EFC of $12,000 is $20,000. The financial aid staff at Stockton is trying to put together a $20,000 package, but they may fall short. They may only be able to offer you $15,000 or $16,000. Well, then you have a smaller gap, maybe about a $4,000 or $5,000 gap. Let's take that same example, same student, and you're going off to Camden County Community College. Just so happens that their cost of attendance is right around $12,000. Your EFC was $12,000. Are you showing any need at that school? No. no need. Okay, so same student, wildly different costs of attendance, which means wildly different financial aid packages. Something that every parent should know when they're looking at the schools that they're looking at. Just because a school looks on paper to be very expensive does not mean that they would not be able to offer you a package that would make it affordable. If they don't, you walk away. But if they do, you have that opportunity. So I guess my advice here is go completely through the process before you make the definitive decision as to whether or not that school's for you or not, or whether or not it's so expensive that we just have to take it off the table. Okay? Let's go on to that next slide. Here's that shopping sheet again that was showed on the previous one. We won't take a lot of time here, but as I said, it's just another tool that the state of New Jersey offers you, and you can get it through New Jersey Fans, which we'll be talking about in a second. And it might be helpful to you as you go through your child's financial aid situation and exactly how much the school is willing to offer you to offset the costs. Okay, next slide. Remember way back when I was telling you we're going to simplify this process, 4 sources, 4 types. Well, here's the federal type of aid. Remember we said 4 sources? And one of those types on the federal side is grants, okay? The biggest of the federal grants is called the Pell Grant. They also have a campus-based program called Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or SEOG. Something very important to remember when it comes to federal grants. Ever since the inception of what is known formally as Title IV funds, any grant from the federal government was explicitly intended for the highest need, lowest income families. Let me repeat that. Highest need, lowest income families, which means that a lot of the people who live in the Eastern Regional School District might not be eligible for a federal grant. All right? It goes to the highest need. Let's say you are one of those folks who fills out the FAFSA and you come up with an EFC that is 0. That means the family cannot afford anything. The highest award that you can get from a Pell Grant for this coming year is $6,395. And if you were in that area, that school might also offer you the supplemental loan, somewhere probably between $2,000 and $4,000. If you were a high-need student who is interested in getting into education, you might be eligible for the Teach Grant. But these are the grants that the federal government offers. And again, I repeat to you, when it comes to the federal government, highest need, lowest income students. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a slide showing you the grants that New Jersey offers. The Pell Grant was the largest of the federal grants. For the state, it's TAG, which stands for Tuition Aid Grant, the TAG program. Now, the TAG has a little bit different focus to it. It is a wider or larger umbrella, so to speak, than Pell Grant, where Pell Grant is only for the highest need, lowest income students. TAG branches out and reaches a lot more students than Pell does. Let me prove that to you. Last year, a little over 77,000 students in the state of New Jersey received a TAG grant, whether it be full-time or part-time. The state distributed a little over $244 million in TAG. That's a little over $50 million more than Pell Grant money that was distributed in the state of New Jersey. So clearly, the largest of the grants is the state grant, not the federal grant. TAG is. That's the good news. The bad news, some of your sons and daughters are looking to go to school out of state. They do not want to stay in the state of New Jersey. You can't take TAG money out of the state of New Jersey. That's the bad news part of this. Now, I also want to emphasize a couple of other programs that the state offers. One is the NJ STARS program. The STARS program is one of 2 that could really help you offset the cost of a college education. Let's say your student is a very strong student here at Eastern Regional High School, and Jason and the staff can witness to HESA that they're in the top 15% of the class, even though you don't publicly rank, but you're in the top 15%. If you are, you would probably get a letter from the state of New Jersey, from HESA, saying you're eligible for NJ Stars. And what that means is if you decide to start your college career at your local county college, they would cover the tuition for you. That can really reduce the cost. There's another angle to this as well, one called the Community College Opportunity Grant, where STARS is academic based. The Community College Opportunity Grant is need based. If you have an adjusted gross income, when you're filling out your FAFSA, if your adjusted gross income is $65,000 or less, you are eligible for this CCOG. And what they do with CCOG is they guarantee that the combination of grants that you're eligible for from the feds and the state, like Pell or TAG, in combination with this grant, will guarantee that all of your tuition and any academic fee that you incur is covered. It's free. All you would be paying for is your books, and if you had any type of activity fees or non-academic fees. That really reduces your cost because you could do that for 2-3 years, collect up to 64 credits and have all those credits transferred to a senior institution, and you could be way ahead of the game financially in getting your baccalaureate degree. So 2 things that I just wanted to point out to you, not just TAG, but these other programs that can really help mitigate the cost of a college education from the state. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I've been alluding to this, and you're going to see 2 slides on this particular resource. But all students, once you have filed your FAFSA, you then become, and you have a New Jersey address, of course, you become part of what's called NJFAMS, which stands for Financial Aid Management System. And once you know you filed your FAFSA and that data has gone to the state of New Jersey, you can create a login for yourself and go on and have this individual FAMS account on your behalf. Let's go on to that next slide. And this is what it would look like once you have the account. Welcome to FAMS. And let's say you are an older student now. This isn't your first year filing a FAFSA. What NJFAMS does, it will track year by year and keep it all together and be a reminder to you. And might say to you, hey, you filled out last year's FAFSA when you were a freshman, but remember, you got to fill it out for sophomore year too. So it acts as a tracker, as a reminder to you. It gives you information about your award, if you are eligible for TAG. If the people who are running TAG need extra information from you, you can find that out through the NJFAMS system. Again, another resource, another tool that you can use once you've filed your FAFSA that will help mitigate you through the process and remind you of things that you need to do as well. So remember NJFAMS as a resource, as a help to you. Okay, next slide. Oh, I had another FAMS one. See, I was really pushing the FAMS on you for today. One of the things that this slide is trying to remind you of as well is it will actually act as a to-do list for you for the 21-22 academic year and guide you through. You have a lot of things on your mind. Parents, you have a lot of things on your mind. The FAMS can be a reminder to you of what you've done on the to-do list and what you still have to do. And that's why we think it's a useful tool for you. Okay, enough with NJFAMS. Let's move on. Remember before I was talking to you about gaps and shortfalls in financial aid. And we also talked about self-help loans. When you're talking about loans, I think it's very helpful and it simplifies the process for you. When you think of first tier and second tier loans. What is the first tier loan? It's called the Federal Direct Student Loan Program. And as I've said to you before, no matter what school you go to, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, even a for-profit school, okay? The first tier loan is the Federal Direct Student Loan Program. It's one of the reasons why you file a FAFSA, not just for the grants and scholarships, but you've got to file a FAFSA if you're going to get a Federal Direct Student Loan. Now, if you are eligible for the loan, the Federal Direct Loan comes in two types: subsidized and unsubsidized. What does that mean? Well, if you show need, subsidized means that any accruing interest will be delayed or deferred, and you won't have to pay it while the student's going to school and 6 months after they graduate or terminate their college career. If you don't show need, you can still get the loan, but it would be unsubsidized. And parents, as we all know, a loan is a loan is a loan, whether it's a college loan, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's a car loan. The minute you take that loan out, you and I both know the ticker starts. Interest begins to accrue the second you take the loan. So who's paying that? If it's unsubsidized, you're responsible for the accruing interest. If it's subsidized, you won't have any accruing interest until the student graduates or terminates their college career. That's the difference. And you can see the maximums for each year. The maximum for a freshman is $5,500, broken down as $3,500 need-based potentially and $2,000 unsubsidized. In the sophomore year, it goes up to $4,500 plus $2. And then a junior and senior year, $5,500 plus the $2 unsubsidized. Okay? So again, subsidized and unsubsidized. One word to the wise before we get off this particular slide. If you are involved with unsubsidized loans, whether it's the Federal Direct Loan or the ones I'm about to get into with you, which are called alternative or supplemental loans, if you have an unsubsidized loan, I strongly urge you, both from a professional standpoint and remember, a parent who put 3 students through school, if you have an unsubsidized loan, pay the accruing interest, whether they have you on a monthly or a quarterly basis, however they do it. When they give you the bill for the unsubsidized loan, I'm here to tell you, even if it strains your budget a little bit, pay that accruing interest. Do everything you can not to have accruing interest snowball into the principal. Let me give you a quick little example. Let's just suppose you have gotten $10,000 each year for 4 straight years of unsubsidized loans. If you think that after 4 years, 10 times 4, you own $40,000 on your loans, you're very good at math, but very naive on how loans work. It's not just the 40,000, it's the 40,000 plus all of those months of accruing interest. Don't get your calculator out. We've done it before at the office. It comes out to about $47,000, $48,000. That's what you would owe. And that's just on $10,000 each year. So you can see why I'm saying and why I'm saying it. By paying that unsubsidized accruing interest, you're keeping better control over the principal of the college loans that your son or daughter are getting. Okay, enough on that. Let's go to the next slide. Again, we saw the maximums. The maximum on a Federal Direct Loan in the freshman year is $5,500. The max in a junior and senior year is only $7,500. For many of you, you're going to have a second tier loan, as I call it. And those second tier loans are formally known as alternative or supplemental loans. Federal government has one. State of New Jersey has one. There's also private entities that have them as well. Let's start with the New Jersey version, which is called NJ Class. There is one particular thing. I like the interest rates. They're a little bit better than the Feds. But there's one overriding thing that I really like about NJ Class. And it's down at the bottom. If you see the last bullet point, it says, student or parent can be the borrower. Many of you out there right now listening to this Zoom meeting have more than one student who's going to go off to college. As a matter of fact, New Jersey census, not New Jersey, but national census data tells us that for every one child family, there are over 13 multiple child families. So the vast majority of us have more than one to put through college. Like me, I had 3. Some of you will have 2. Some of you have even more. And having the ability with NJ Class to have the student as the borrower and the parent as the cosigner can really help leverage you when you're looking to put 2 or 3 or 4 students through college. Look at the Federal Plus program. Only the parent can be the borrower. And if you have a second, a third, or even a 4th child, you can financially get all gummed up with the parent trying to be the sole borrower for the first, the second, and then even the 3rd child. It's one of the reasons why I kind of lean towards NJ Class over Federal Plus. And the other nice thing about Class, even though it's a state loan program, you can take it out of state. So even though you can't take the tuition aid grant, the New Jersey grant out of state, you can take an NJ Class loan out of state. Now, many students have asked and many parents have asked about private alternative loans. And there are many companies that have these things. Sallie Mae is one of them. There's a very popular national one called SoFi, S-O-F-I. For those of you who are baseball fans, Citizens Bank, Citizens Bank Park, but Citizens Bank is very big with college alternative loans. City Assist, Citibank, which are their City Assist program. There's all sorts of ones out there. I'm not a big fan of them. And I'm not a big fan because they have higher interest rates. Even someone who has a sterling FICO score, although yours will be a little bit less than someone who doesn't, it still can, a very dangerous way of, in my opinion, a very dangerous way of trying to finance a college education. If you need to get into these private loans, maybe you also need to rethink the school that you're looking at so that you don't get yourself into a situation where an undergraduate degree can cost well over $100,000, $150,000 in loans. I'd like to see you avoid that type of a situation. But again, the private loans are out there. If you did have to go to second tier loans, I'm here to tell you from experience, both as a professional and as a parent, you'd want to stick with Class or Plus, depending on your situation. So those are the loans. Let's go on to the next slide. Some of you listening to me today have students who are in middle school or even in grammar school. And if you do, and if you haven't started to save for their college expenses, I'm here to tell you, do everything you can to start saving money. And one of the best vehicles that just about every state has is called the 529 College Savings Plan. You don't necessarily have to use the New Jersey College Savings Plan called NJ Best. If you think that New York is better, or Alaska, or Virginia, so be it. You could use those as well. But one nice feature about NJ Best is depending on the time that you have, the number of years that you have been saving in 529, you might be eligible for a scholarship. And that scholarship could go up to $1,500. And when you put that in with the growth within the college savings plan, it gives you a pretty nice rate of return. So for any of you out there listening to this session this evening, and you may have a 7th grader or a 9th grader or even a 2nd or 3rd grader, and you haven't started a 529 college savings plan, I'm here to implore you to really look seriously into these as a vehicle to help you save. If there's one thing I want you to learn about the college selection process, you will never get dollar for dollar from the financial aid system what you can save on your own. Just remember that. So never be inhibited or think, oh, if I save, I'll be punished. You're not. The system doesn't work that way. So anything you can save always helps you and your child, you and your student. Okay, enough with NJ Best. Let's do a quick little review. As I said before, I wanted to very quickly not only go through the process of financial aid with you, but give you the resources. And I think the resources are equally as important as you understanding the process, because if you know those resources are available, you'll know where to go if and when you have questions. In a second, we're going to be taking questions here. But when I'm gone, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, if you have a question, I want you to be able to know where to go to ask those questions. And so you have the website for HESA. You also have the website for the NJ class program. You even have what HESA calls their customer care line to call if you have specific questions. Even when you're in the midst of filing the FAFSA, it could be very, very helpful to you. And so we wanted to show those to you as well. And Jason, if you click it one more time, it is time for those questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason. I know he's been getting some things coming through, and we're ready to answer any questions that you may have on financial aid.
Okay, I'm going to enable the chat feature. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat for YouTube, and I will read them to John, and John will do his best to answer any questions that you have out there. Okay, sorry about that. The chat should be enabled now. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, John, we have our first question.
Okay.
Question is, if our student is a junior, should we fill out the financial aid forms by October 1st this year?
No, that's a very good question. You can only fill it out from October 1st on in your senior year. In the junior year, you cannot officially, excuse me, you cannot officially file a FAFSA. However, if you go out to FAFSA.gov or FAFSA on the web and scroll down, you will see that there is something called FAFSA Forecaster. It's FAFSA, the number 4, caster. It's not, excuse me, it's not official, but it'll allow you, excuse me, that's better. It will allow you to fill out a simulated FAFSA and actually give you a simulated expected family contribution. So if there are any junior parents out there, I would strongly urge you to go out to the FAFSA on the web and look for FAFSA Forecaster. And on the spot, after you fill it out, it will give you a mock EFC so you know what range you fall into. Excuse me about that. Having a little congestion here.
Okay, another question. Are there any NJ grants available for out-of-state schools?
Unfortunately, that is a very quick answer to that question. There are no grants or scholarships that the state of New Jersey offers where you can take it out of state. And you will find that that's true for all the other states as well. What they call it is reciprocity. There is no reciprocity for grants or scholarships between states. Very rare. So even if a student was in Pennsylvania and they wanted to come to New Jersey, they couldn't take their Pennsylvania grant here either. Or you wanted to go down to Florida, well, you can't take New Jersey down to Florida with you. And Florida, excuse me, you can't come from Florida up to New Jersey or Pennsylvania and get a grant. Just doesn't happen, unfortunately. You lose that dimension when you go out of state.
Okay, next question is, will you provide a copy of this on the ECC RSD website? Yes, this broadcast will be available to view whenever you want through our YouTube channel, the ECC RSD YouTube channel, and we'll have links available to any information on our website through the main page and through the guidance tab.
And Jason, may I add something there as well? Evening, take a week, maybe even 2 weeks, and go back on to the YouTube website for Eastern Regional and view it again. And if you have friends who couldn't participate this evening and you're talking, direct them towards it as well. There's enough information out there, especially the resources that you might not always remember, that are out there on those slides that will be very, very helpful to you if you go through this.
John, I muted you by accident. If you would just unmute yourself.
I'm in there.
Okay.
Did they not hear what I said, or should I repeat
Yeah,
that?
go ahead and repeat just in case it didn't come through my
We had a
mic.
little technical flaw there. All I was repeating is, as Jason reminded you, he's going to have this session out on the YouTube website for Eastern Regional. And everyone who's in my voice right now, hear my voice right now, I am strongly suggesting to you, yes, you participated today, but a week from now, 2 weeks from now, if you have a half an hour free time, a little free time, please view it again. The resources that are in these slides could be invaluable to you when you're going through the process. And if you have friends who missed it, recommend that they go out and look at it on the website as well. Jason has this. It's going to be there for anybody to use as you're going through the process.
Okay, we'll give it another minute or two for questions. Okay, John, next question is, how long does it usually take from the completion of the FAFSA until we find out how much we qualify for?
Okay, that's going to vary from school to school. I'm going to break your question down into two forms. When you send the information on the FAFSA, when you electronically send it to the federal processor, it will probably take no more, it could be less than this, but no more than 3 days for the federal processor to electronically correspond back to you and reiterate what you gave them on the FAFSA but also as you read it carefully, it'll give you the EFC, the expected family contribution. So you'll have that. Now, as you apply, they're also simultaneously sending your information to all the different schools that you applied to. When you're filling out the FAFSA, you can put as many as 5 or 6 schools on the FAFSA, and they will electronically receive your EFC and the data. If you need more, you can always do that when they send you their correspondence. You can always add extra schools. So when the school gets it, it depends on what type of school it is. If it is a school that is on what we call rolling admissions, and you have already been accepted at that school, they will get a financial aid package to you probably within 2 or 3 weeks because they're rolling it out. So let's say you filled out, well, again, I'm going to use Stockton as an example because of my familiarity there, having retired from there. But let's say you filed your FAFSA on October 10th. The federal processor got back to you on the 14th or the 13th, okay? Your information was sent electronically to Stockton along with other schools, but it was sent to Stockton somewhere around the 13th or 14th as well. And you've already been accepted at Stockton. You could expect to get a financial aid package from Stockton as early as the first week in November. So it's rolling. And about 80% of the schools are on what we call rolling admissions. So the minute we know that you've been accepted, that information goes to the financial aid office and they can create the package and get it out to you as soon as they possibly can. However, there are still some very competitive schools that are on what we call regular admissions. And what that means is they gather all of their freshman admissions candidates' data and they don't send out any acceptances or rejections or anything else until the first or second week in March. So schools like Princeton, schools like Villanova, the College of New Jersey, these are schools that are on that regular admissions process. No one's sending you a financial aid package until they've officially accepted you. So if they're going to accept you in the first or second week of March, that means you're going to get the financial aid package in the first or second week of March. So I hope that thoroughly answers your question for you. So it depends on the school. Rolling admissions, as soon as you've been accepted and you've gotten the financial aid data out there, within a week or two, they're going to get something out to you about that. For those other schools, don't let it confuse you.
Okay. We're going to give it one more minute, see if there's any more questions.
Okay. Any other questions that they have? These are all good questions.
Okay, so any questions out there, feel free to type into the chat and we'll have John or myself.
And I just thought of something that if they
Okay, I think we lost John's feed there. I see he got bounced out of the room.
I did get bounced.
Yeah.
It's rotating saying connecting, but I don't know if it is connecting.
Okay. Okay, not seeing any more questions.
Okay. Then you bounced me out at the right time.
Then you got bounced out at the right time. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Again, we'll have links to this and to the PowerPoint and to the presentation itself on our website. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Guidance or myself, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have regarding the college application process, the financial aid process, or anything post-secondary related. So once again, I'd like to thank John Iacovelli for coming tonight, and I'd like to thank all of the viewers at home for tuning in, and thank you and have a good evening. Bye-bye.